It's been about 1 year now since I got on that plane to come to the Middle East. I came here for a job assignment to work with Afghans. These people come from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and even Iran. Over 2 million of them have come here to work. In this past year, I've learned more about this people group than any encyclopedia or lecture could have told me. When you sit on their couch, drink tea, and hear their life stories, you get to really know their hearts and dreams. You get to experience their culture. That's what I came here to do, to get involved in their lives, and to tell them of Christ, the one who transformed mine. I wasn't always like that. Not long before coming here, I was just your average churchgoer. I was also extremely bored. As a photographer, I grew tired of the same old of work. I wanted something more. God used a very selfish desire to become my ultimate calling. He showed me a position in the Middle East. There was an opportunity out here to reach out to Afghans and to do photography as well. God began to soften my heart, though. He molded me into His disciple and gave me a sincere desire to see these people come to salvation. Last year, I arrived with cameras in tow. I knew the specifics of my job, but I knew so little about the Afghans I was seeking to reach with the good news. I wanted to gain as much knowledge as possible, so I delved into their shops and neighborhoods. And as I did, I began to learn more about the Afghans abroad. Afghans are made up of people groups that span several countries in Central Asia. The Pashtuns are one of the most dominant groups, while Hazaras, Tajiks, and Uzbeks are some of the other major groups. Then there's the Baluch. Starting out, I didn't know much about the Baluchi. I wanted to get informed, so I sat down with a Christian worker who had experience among these people. So, tell me about the Baluch. Where did they come from?
Well, their heartland is Balochistan, coming from the word Baloch. And it's not really a political geographic entity. It's an area that they claim historically for several hundreds of years. Most of it is in Pakistan, and Pakistan has 4 provinces. One of them is called Balochistan. Then part of Balochistan is in Iran. Iran also has a province called Sistan and Balochistan. And then southern Afghanistan is also part of this greater Balochistan. So that's their heartland in those 3 countries.
So how many are there?
Probably 9 to 10 million Baloch in the world. Maybe 7 or 8 million in the Balochistan province of Pakistan. Then maybe 500,000 in Iran, maybe 500,000 in Afghanistan, and maybe 500,000 in the Gulf.
Almost 10 million people spread over 3 countries without one to call their own. They could even be found here, in the Middle East. I'd learned this much myself. Almost everywhere I went, I'd find them living and working in cities. They were a kind people, but passing through I'd never got the chance to learn of their culture and homeland. It just seemed so strange to have an ethnicity that big, but to not know anything about them. Wherever I went, I'd seek them out, hoping to learn more, but it was tough. I didn't even really know what to look for. Okay, so the Baluch are a minority among Pakistan and the other countries. But what separates them from the other people groups? What would make them distinct?
Well, originally, and probably still primarily, it's their language. There are actually 3 Balochi languages, but that's the primary distinctive is their language. Also, they would have distinct cultural practices as compared to surrounding peoples in terms of what they do surrounding a birth, a death, a marriage, coming of age, those kind of things. They have their own dances, their own songs, their own poetry. It's actually a culturally fairly rich group of people going back several hundred years.
During my first few months, I'd met the Baluch in all manner of places. Here I ate at this cafe owned by Baluchi. Baluchi seemed to be naturally business savvy, so mixed with their hospitable nature, restaurant work seems to be a common job among them. When I visited this small bazaar, I also found Baluchi in it. While predominantly Pashtun, I've met many Baluch shopkeepers. They sell everything from sandals, headscarves, and just about anything else they think can fetch a price. As I got to sit down and talk with them, I learned a startling fact. Many were here alone, with their families back in Baluchistan. Even abroad, they were still scattered. Why would they leave their families and move to the Middle East? Since I've been here, I've seen Baluch in almost every city I've visited. So, why would they leave Baluchistan?
So the Baluch are a people who originally were tribal, still are tribal, but were nomadic. They live in a very, very harsh environment, mainly desert, mountains. They're subsistence farmers. They have cattle and sheep and goats, and they're a very unique people that a lot of people in the world have not heard about. A number of them also live in the Gulf states around the Persian Gulf, Arab countries where they are laborers or workers. A lot of them, in fact, have migrated there years and years ago because of the need for work.
The lands of Afghanistan and Pakistan have always been hard places to earn a living. It's no surprise now to see why they would go in search of work, but if they'd come here long ago, they must have some established communities. It was during a series of trips that I would get to see this. First stop, Muscat, the capital of Oman. Muscat's this beautiful port city that retains much of its heritage and cultural feel. Right next to Muscat's harbor is the Mutra Souk. The main corridors offer amazing sights and sounds that can easily overwhelm the senses. Furthermore, the souk branches off into dozens of alleyways full of shops. As I walked around the bustling shops and bazaars, I'd learned that some of these shopkeepers were the Baluch. A friend of mine clued me in on a whole neighborhood that was exclusively Baluch. Al Quwain is the smallest of the emirates in the United Arab Emirates. On the outskirts of the city is a neighborhood, estimated to have the largest concentration of Baluch in the UAE. It's said that a large population of Baluch were brought over to serve as security forces many years ago. To solve the problem of housing, the Baluch were given this neighborhood to live in. Many generations later, they cling to what's left of their heritage, but have largely adopted Middle Eastern culture and dress. There were other cities I visited. The Baluch could be found at almost every economic and social level. In one place they'd be grunt labor. Another they'd be well-off store owners. I was on a bike ride one day when I discovered a large community of Baluch just living on the outskirts of the city. These guys have become some of my dearest friends, and I've become a frequent face in their shops. Starting out, we would just chat, eat, and have fun. I'd get to share Christ with them over dinner. Over our meals of roti and kadai, we discussed the nature of God and His prophets. I was amazed at their desire to hear about God. You could see they were very spiritual people. On another night, I was invited to attend a cultural dance. I filmed as the crowd got bigger and they just danced away. But eventually even I got swept into the mix. It was then I knew that our friendship was strong. Having formed a great trust, I brought my camera one day and asked them to tell me about Baluchistan.